Oh, Councillor Elliott.
He's coming.
Councillor. Well, you know, she asked the question. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Planning Advisory Committee meeting for the September 14th, 2023. I'd like to call our meeting to order, and if we could start with a motion to approve the agenda for today. So moved. Councillor Ingham, Councillor Elliott, second. All in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? Passed. And a motion to approve the minutes of the PAC meeting for July the 13th. Mayor Donovan, Kelly seconded. All in favor? Everyone had a chance? Contrary minded? Passed. Great. Do we have anyone for public input today? Nope. Okay. I was telling Mayor Donovan earlier that I'm going to see if we can finish by at least 5:30, because apparently there will be sunshine from 4 to 6. And that way, I want to give everyone according to the Weather Network, 4 to 6, we have a window. So that'll hopefully give everyone at least 30 minutes to get home in the sunshine. So, okay. So moving on to new business. First committee member position. Devin, are you taking that on, or?
Yeah, so I put that on there preemptively just in case. I wasn't sure how things were going to go. So we do have an application based on our last posting. We'd posted it twice. So I think I just spoke with Aaron. I think what we're going to do is we're going to bring that to council, and then council can either decide, because it is a specific position. It was Caroline's environmental position on the committee. So we may carry forward with that, or if we do repost it, and the reason that I put it on the agenda is I think it would help if people sort of helped us promote it, because for whatever reason this time we haven't had that much interest. Maybe the summer, not sure, but
Okay.
That's the update. Council will receive that application, I think, direct on the 26th.
Deb, could you clarify, is that going to be a 3-year appointment or
I think that's a 3-year as
a
well.
3 appointment?
Yeah.
So it would start over. It wouldn't just fill in the amount that
No, it's
Caroline,
new.
it's just a new thing. Okay. Yes. So I should recognize Caroline's contribution to our committee, and I'm sorry I was remiss in doing that. Caroline has moved, I think, to Halifax. She's pursuing a master's degree in planning, I believe, and which is wonderful for her. We wish her all the best. And she was a wonderful committee member. She certainly took the work. She really dug in very quickly. And but it's wonderful for her and a loss for us. And it's going to be, I think, work for us to try to find somebody who with that area of specialization. So, but yeah, so if we could record that in the minutes. Then. Okay. Just in time. Okay, so if we could move on now to the DA 2023-001 for 234 Main Street Development Agreement.
Okay, so we have the applicants that just walked in. You probably haven't been in this type of meeting before. Maybe, have you? No, okay. So just for their benefit, I'm going to do a presentation, and this is the Planning Advisory Committee. They're going to make a recommendation onto council. There really isn't any opportunity to interact. Just so you know, I've had many different people think different things when they come in. So yes, this is a 234 Main Street proposal. So this is a proposal to build 10-unit building with shared amenities amongst the folks that would be living in the 10 units. So this is an innovative proposal, certainly in my time here, and it does provide opportunities for these folks to age in place. There is underground parking, bicycle parking, and elevator, rooftop solar, and as I said, some shared spaces that are listed there. So I think we're all familiar with this site at 234 Main Street, just east of the downtown. It's a relatively flat site. It does have a bit of a grade change to the north. So this is a really generalized landscape plan for the site. We would require, as we move forward, more detailed landscaping. We do sometimes hold back on having people jump into really detailed drawings until there's a little more certainty around the application. But they are working with Michael Napier on this file. I did put a note on this, just that the materials on the exterior are still being considered, just because I have had some comments from people wondering why they're building a white concrete box. So it will be detailed. This is a rendering of the massing. I think even the openings, the windows aren't finalized. So, but this gives a really good idea of scale and style primarily. So there is some notes on the materials in the report. So this is the rear elevation. This would be along the trail. So you can see the different sort of tiered roof lines, shared space, patios. Certainly much more of a building than is there today. This is, it is white, yes. I think the great thing about this is you can see that there is a bit of grade on the site and there will be underground parking. So that's always an issue that we discuss is parking requirements and parking demand, particularly for 10 units on a site. So that's really positive from our perspective is to have a bit more of a clean property around parked vehicles. And this is coming in, moving west along Main Street. You can see a silhouette of the adjacent building to the west. So there's still some detail, and there was some comment at the design review committee around having some space along the frontage. There was some talk around covered verandas and spaces for people to gather in and around the frontage, and I think Michael was taking some of that under advisement with you folks. So that's just really high level in terms of the proposal. Staff do believe that this is consistent with the relevant policies of our municipal plan. Where this is enabled is through the neighborhood commercial zone. So it does permit a mix of small scale commercial and residential uses, and unique and site specific developments may be considered by development agreement. I would also consider, from my time here anyway, this is a fairly innovative proposal compared to most of the things that I've seen. So these are some of the policies, and these are all listed in the staff report, so I won't go through everything in great detail, but this is a really great infill project, certainly from my perspective, and hits a lot of the things that we've talked about from a principal perspective for the last 5-7 years. So this is great infill in a really good location, a flat part of town, and houses a number of families. Just to review the process at design review. So we take proposals along Main Street to our design review committee for comment. I did allude to the veranda or front porch. There were questions around building materials, and so there has been some comment provided here around black windows, clapboard on the main body, metal siding, and in some areas, and metal roofing. And we did have a public information meeting as well. There were all meetings that I've had about housing, the question of affordability comes up, and it came up at this meeting as well. I think we had 3 public information meetings in the same night. So we had your file and 2 others, and And there was lots of questions around housing insecurity, affordability, as this committee is certainly really familiar with. I think that's everything there. Just for the uninitiated, the overall process that we do run for a development agreement is substantial. So we started with an information meeting. This has gone through design review and will go to council, I hope in October, if we can get it there. It'll be October or November, and a public hearing and a decision to follow. So this should be wrapped up by Christmas, I would think. And yeah, that's the overview. Thanks.
So any questions for Director Lee?
Janice first. Oh, it doesn't matter. Thanks, Devin. I really like this project idea. I think it's something that's needed in town. Just had a couple questions on, like, when it's age in place, what are the age ranges? Like, on when you say age in place, what are the age ranges? And then that comes to mind, how would you apply for that?
What do you mean? How would you apply for that?
I mean, like, if you're 14 or if you're 18, you're not going to get in this building. Like, it's an age, like, that's sort of, you're looking for more.
Yeah.
That when it's age in place, I was sort of thinking was, are you going to take applications for people that are over 55 or, you know, okay, so, okay.
So, I mean, we're open, but probably.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Our age. That's what you wanted to say.
Not older. No, I get it. I mean, similar to sort of like Tideways was 55 plus, and I remember when I grew up here, I was like 55. That doesn't seem very old. And somebody asked me when they were, would be similar to like when John McKay built the buildings over by, it's similar to sort. Do you know where I'm talking about? Is it similar
Westwood.
towards that? It seems like a lot of people in town that I know that live in there are more retired, and they seem to really like it, and they're really well done and really well kept. So, but it is, and so you just mentioned about accessibility. Are all units accessible? Or most of them are?
I'm trying to figure that out. Initially I thought everybody, it should be everything accessible, but that's what architectural.
We'll require a minimum number from the building code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi. So I had a few questions. So just wanted to confirm that the building itself is just residential, right? Or was there any plan to use it for any other kind of business? And just the rental, they're just rental units, long-term residential units? Okay. And
There are two small guest rooms that are sort of there, and usually, I think the plan is that, you know, when we came, or they're that short term, use that space, but
right.
Like a hotel, like there's two kind of small hotel rooms, I think, for to give your kids visiting.
Yes. Yes. And that's nice to have. I guess just the other thing that I was wondering about is I know that area along there is really prone to flooding. And I was just, when I hear about the underground parking, I was just wondering what kind of considerations had been taken into place for digging down into that really marshy, wet.
Mike certainly knows about that. Too. And, you know, he says they look at the problem.
Yeah, I guess Devin,
Yeah,
a
so
question for you more.
the property is sort of marginally in the floodplain. It's not as in the floodplain as other properties along there. And from our perspective, a concrete parking bunker is a really good use because it's not a nursing home or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, Michael and I have talked about that. They're working on floodproofing. I mean, we would consider a concrete podium as a floodproof building. It can take water and be drained, like they're alluding to with pumps and different things. So they're thinking about that.
And just on the back of that, with the new development, would that would it be tying into the existing town stormwater drains, or would they be managing their own stormwater on their own property?
You mean from the roof leaders? Or you?
Yeah, so any rainwater that comes down on the property, anything that's captured through the gutters, any stormwater that approaches that property.
They'll end up submitting a stormwater plan to Alex, and we're not at that level of detail, but there'll be an expectation that it'll be net zero sort of runoff.
Yeah.
We've been discouraging and now moving to not allowing tying into our system.
Yes,
Yeah, you maybe.
I'm aware.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that was all. I just, I guess you kind of alluded to it on when you showed the pictures. So those pictures are kind of what it's going to look like, but it doesn't really represent necessarily the colors or the materials that are going to be used. So it is not a big white concrete box. Okay.
We haven't really.
So that gives some of the answers to the question. Just looks.
No, but it looks like it.
Yeah.
The architect answered.
And you're having it as close to the street as possible, I assume, for the purpose of having the setbacks right at the limit.
So, I'm not
It's
sure.
roughly put this house to the side.
Yeah.
We've been talking to Michael about having some level of consistent setback along the street. It's generally how we would work with people in this condition. None of them are perfectly uniform, but we try to encourage that.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Mayor Jonathan?
Thank you. I love it. I even like the way it looks now. It's clean and modern. It's very Michael. It's what it looks like. It reminds me of his house kind of. I do agree that if possible, some kind of porch front. I just think street presence is enjoyable for people who live in a house and enjoyable for streetscape. So I agree with that. I think it's a really great project, and thank you for bringing that. I think it's the kind of thing that Wolfville needs, and I'm sure you will have no problem renting it.
We were thinking of a park front, but when we went to the drawings, we did the same thing.
Yeah,
It's a little front kind of box.
Yeah.
He's gonna redraw.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll come up with something very nice, but I think it's great.
Hi, guys. I think it's a great project too, from the social perspective and innovative in terms of housing choices in town. So it's great to see. My question was more around the setback from the trail in the back. I'm sure there's lots of space there, but we'll have the Harvest Moon Trail running behind, right? So I was thinking something that you might look at may or may not be something that you would consider as a connection to the trail in the back for your residents, which would be nice. And yeah, it looks like you've got plenty, and there's probably existing tree. I think there's existing trees there now anyway behind that lot. So for trail users, I'm thinking of sort of their experience on the trail, not being impeded by a building sort of right in there on their side. But it looks like there's a good distance there. So. Yeah. Right. Yeah. There's other things that are further back. Yeah. And it drops down as a ditch almost, if I recall that space. So no, congratulations. I think it's really interesting.
Councillor Elliott?
Thank you. Also, congratulations. I was kind of surprised that it was 10 units, because I had the word on the street was that it was going to be 3. And then I saw the layout of each floor and those extra bedrooms for visitors. I just think that's a terrific idea. So kudos for that. I agree also about the porch. The Burton's house next door is a registered heritage building. And
Which,
The yellow one?
the yellow one, yeah, I think it was Dr. Sawyer, it's named after. But the other Burton house on the other side also has a porch on it. And my understanding is that Wolfville, along Main Street, it was the street, the porch, the house.
right.
So that's very consistent, would be very consistent with the history of architecture in Wolfville.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I mean, I'd like to see it compatible with, you know, as you're driving down, it's sort of big,
Does it stand out?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
well,
disagree.
good on you.
I don't mind the way it is. Michael, sorry.
That's
Sorry
okay.
if I missed you.
That's fine. Again, I think it's very exciting too. It's a really good looking project. I just had a question around when I look at that overview, and I know things are still being planned, just around street access, a driveway, and then parking. Underground parking is great for the residents, but if 10 residents all have a visitor or half of them have, like, where are those people going to park? And I don't want to, like, I know you don't want to lose trees in the back and things, but I just kind of wonder about, there's got to be some surface parking, I would think, for visitors to the building.
Yeah, I guess I got it. That's
Yeah,
Michael.
Michael, no, but I think there are a couple, just as you're going in down the driveway, there will be some space. Not sure.
I've talked to Michael about guest parking, and he's building that in as well. It's something that he's working on. We're working with him on a more detailed landscape plan that hopefully will cover some of that. The porch.
Hopefully we won't have a lot of cars, maybe we can show them that.
There you go.
The cars, the 4 or 5 electric cars, they're all self-directed. Tobies. But I mean, yeah. I mean, we're planning for electric.
Go ahead. Did you, okay. Okay.
I just have a quick question. Devin, can you go back to the landscape picture? And I don't know what
Driveway
those
question.
dotted, that one, the dotted lines are, but it, and I know it's just a concept, it looks like the driveway is half on the
Yeah.
next door neighbor's property.
What was your question? What was the-
Yeah, so I just wondered, is that okay?
It's on Burton's property.
Okay, it is.
It's right away.
I see.
The three houses are right now, kind of right away.
I see.
But it's his property.
Wow.
Okay.
So we told him that, he said, oh.
Okay. Right.
Okay. Great. That was actually going to be my question.
There's a number of properties along Main Street that have similar arrangements.
Right
Some of
away.
them over time have terminated those arrangements, and some haven't.
I also wanted to express my support for this project. It was pretty impressive, and I like the design. I have to confess, I really like the white modern look. And living as I do in a stucco house that at the time was considered a very modern material, next door to 2 properties that have clapboard, is that what you would call it? And have a very different style because they're older. I think that there's room in Wolfville for a variety of architectural designs and materials complementing each other. I personally wouldn't necessarily feel compelled to use whatever clapboard or anything else, because I think there's some lovely modern materials like ours that could really complement. So, but it's great because you've got all sorts of architectural options and a lot of diversity in this, which makes it a very interesting building. The lines themselves are very interesting, regardless of whatever material you choose to use. So I think it'll definitely be a great addition to Main Street. So anyway, so any more comments on?
I would move that the Planning Advisory Committee provide a positive recommendation to the Town Council for the draft development agreement for PID 55274591, and that it be forwarded to council for initial consideration.
Seconder, please. Councillor Ingham, call for the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Okay, and that update.
Okay, bear with me as I take you through the Housing Accelerator Fund journey we've been on. So just a reminder, I have presented this, this isn't Groundhog's Day. I did present this and I did at the time, this was in August or no, July. The deadline at the time was in August. It was really impossible to put something together at the time. Through work of many, I think, small rural Indigenous communities, the funding deadline for our bucket of money has been extended till September 29th. So we've taken some more time to look at this, have had more time to kind of understand the parameters and what the potential is. So including a few discussions with CMHC, and I should acknowledge how many hours Lindsay has put into this to date and more to come. Okay, so this is a $4 billion federal fund. We are in the small rural stream, and I'm calling this our sober second thought. The application is due on the 29th, so just for context, we would take this to council. Coming out of a potential motion here, we would take it direct to council on the 26th. And we would essentially have the application ready if the will is there to submit. But I think some consideration needs to be given to that. So I think we all know that there's huge need for housing in the province. I just want to cover these things because I think this is really the most important piece. Our average growth rate over the last number of years has been about 25 units per year, and that includes the data that we were given by CMHC and the province. We've had years, and some of you would have seen these years where a multi-unit building comes online and we've had up to 100 units. Those are abnormal years, and we've had lower years, certainly through the pandemic, but on average, we're looking at about 25 units a year. The needs assessment that has been shared, limited, we've shared it in a limited capacity, but we are okay sharing the high level of this. It's pretty shocking to me, to be honest, the numbers, but so we have a current shortage of 165 units. The shortage projected out to 2027 is 830 units, and with current trends being assumed in their model, it's 1,700 units by 2032. So when you think of 25 units per year and then put them beside those numbers, it really is quite staggering. And I think for me, when we recommended not to move forward with the application, I really sort of had to think about that, do a bit of a gut check on what we're doing here and whether we want to really move the needle on this issue. Because there is opportunity to. So that same needs assessment talks about the need is for young families and seniors. In the shorter term, young families consistently from now for quite some time with the large generation we have, the baby boomers, the demand is going to be very strong for a seniors market. I think these numbers are really interesting, and Lindsay's developed some graphics on these that we're hoping to roll out so people can understand these needs. So the average household, an average household income of $167,000 is needed to buy a house in Wolfville. So 90% of residents earn below this amount. That is really shocking. The median home price increased from $258,000 in 2016 to $500,000 in 2022. So just things that no one would have predicted. And renters need to earn a minimum of $45,000 to afford a one-bedroom apartment. So that's 75% of lone person households earning less than this. And certainly students are being put in a fairly precarious situation, both with supply issues on the campus and what the market housing is like in the community. So I just wanted to sort of read that into the recording, just so people are clear on what these numbers are. We have started housing work, but as we've gotten further into this, as I was saying, and sort of better understanding the needs, processing this needs assessment, we got really at the same time as the deadline. So my reality is we have limited capacity and budgets to move multiple initiatives forward at the same time. The way that I'm looking at this point is we could really use some of the funding to bring in additional support, whether that's at a staff level, consultant, or otherwise. And as we go through the initiatives that I think are fairly proven at this point, I think we'll need that really solid rationale to make change. And a lot of this will be the next council, just the way that the funding works out and project initiation will really be with the next council. But this is the nature of working through things. Yeah, so one of the biggest things that probably changed in our thinking as we went through this was the importance of the action plan. So the fund is really focused on making systematic change for long-term housing supply, but the actual dollars that you get are based on the number of units that are being created, the number of permits issued between essentially the time of the funding, which would be early 24, until essentially the fall of 2026. Fairly small window to create units. And so in a lot of ways, what we're relying on is units that are in the pipeline. Because the reality is the planning cycle for significant investment is multiple years. People aren't showing up in my office and then starting to build 2 months later. That maybe for small projects, but not for multi-unit. It's just not happening. So yeah, we're going to present a bunch of initiatives here. A list of initiatives is provided by CMHC. They want to see those initiatives implemented. That's why they're kind of giving us a menu of proven Canadian-wide initiatives. These are things that you should do is kind of how we're reading them. And each one can and should increase housing supply more in probably a 10-year window. So there's kind of two projections that they're evaluating this on. What are the short-term number of units? And that's really the level of funding that you're getting. And then how are you actually changing the rules, regulations, the landscape to bring on more units over time? And going back to the number, the 1,700 number by 2032, I'm not sure we could do much of anything to bring that many units on. That seems really difficult from what I know and what the labor market is. So these are just the objectives of the fund. Again, just want to go through these so everyone understands. So it's to create more housing at an accelerated pace and enhance certainty in the approvals and building process, while also supporting these priorities. So these are priorities that are in our planning documents that, to be fair, most communities are struggling to even get these things in their planning documents, but then to actually implement them is a whole nother story. I won't read all those off, but these are all the things that are in the council strategic plan and our planning documents. And I will just say about number 2, in conversations that I'm in about housing in the province, that second objective is really a 20-year problem. It's been very difficult to get things built in this province for a long time. And so a big thrust is changing the way we think about approvals and changing the way that things go through approval processes. I think we've done a better job. We've changed some things, but just from 2016, 17 till now, things have changed a lot. Certainly from an economics perspective, and having project viability is very different even in the last 2 years. The Accelerator Fund, yeah, so these are new initiatives, which is what we're showing. And for each initiative, I've sort of said this already, but we do have to outline generally how the initiative is going to play out. These are some of the initiatives from CMHC. And so we've, and in my world, in the planning world, these are known pieces. You can type in, I teach a class at Acadia and I showed at the first class, you know, what does ChatGPT, what is the answer they're giving you to solve the housing crisis? These aren't a secret. Like, you know, there's many books written about this. These are proven strategies to bring more supply on. So things like accessory dwelling units, mixed use projects, delegating development approval to staff, partnering with nonprofit housing providers. I'm just giving you a sense that what we're going to go through is very consistent with the guidance that we've been given from CMHC. So these are the initiatives. I think we actually have 11 now. 12. So some of these play out under, I would say, one larger umbrella, but the way that they've set up the application, and this was kind of my struggle with this, is I would put a lot of these into, you know, reviewing the land use bylaw for more efficiencies, and that would be number one, and it would have a number of initiatives. We could hire someone to come in and work with council on a scope, you know, working through those different things. It seems like they want us to break these out individually, so we are. Just so you know, you'll see the same title at the beginning and then sort of a more specific piece. So regulatory changes and reform of the land use bylaw to increase housing supply. And we're talking about inclusionary zoning here. So a framework that essentially requires some number of affordable units based on certain conditions. And this is recent legislation that the province has given us. We have a loose system now of somewhat attached to additional building height and a menu of public benefit that they could pursue. To be honest, the economics of what we have for both building height is just not there. So there's really no proposal coming in because the pro forma is not going to work for a developer. So we need to look at those issues in tandem. And a lot of these issues in the land use bylaw really work together, particularly when we're working with developers who are looking to spend, you know, $18 million on a multi-unit building somewhere. So this is one framework to impact non-market housing. And I'm going to differentiate a little bit between non-market and market housing as we go through here. So this is more specific about building height. We have discussed building height. We've talked about it in the East End. We haven't talked about it in other places. I think this is a very good tool to achieve economies of scale, to have more housing, more affordable housing. And we're not talking about 20-story buildings, but I do think this is a proven tool to bring supply on. Some of you would have been involved in the Baptist Church coming in with a very, very early proposal, but it was a discussion of the time. It was a different time, to be honest. We certainly didn't have all the information we have now. So this is initiative 2, initiative 3. These, and to me, these are all interrelated, but I'm breaking them out. So parking requirements are really big around affordability, around viability, certainly around floor area, and adding more units is incredibly important. And we're seeing projects where people are talking about things like shared vehicles, active transportation, and other means. Most downtowns in the country, most good downtowns, they don't have a parking requirement. And so that is something that we need to look at. I'm not saying we don't need a parking requirement at all, but I think things have changed to offer this certainly as an incentive. This is something we've talked about for quite a while. So this would be looking at R1. We've talked about it, haven't moved forward on it. So we would bring this into this bigger project. Probably with timelines out in the 25, 26 towards the second part of the funding. I think it would take us until the election to get organized, to be honest, to kick things off. I don't think any major decisions would be made. This is, again, talking about the mechanics of approvals and zoning. So I've met with a lot of landowners who want to do projects that at the same time don't want to do projects that will involve 18 months of uncertainty and a significant outlay of capital. So they're looking for a little more certainty in the approval and a little more reality around how much it's costing to do projects in 2023. And so I think I don't think this is a complete new zoning bylaw. I think there's little pockets of town where there's specific lots. There's a number of R4 properties that are existing in the town where I've had people approach me about doing projects there. They go back and look at it. The project doesn't make sense under the existing framework. So there would be some of that, and then there would be some of moving projects from a more discretionary process into probably a site plan or as of right process. And again, I just remind you that a lot of this can be kind of read into an RFP for someone to, this would be a scope of work as a work plan. Some of these pieces I think would be better suited for staff, but I would want a lot of this to have someone work on it with us. This one is fairly straightforward, just looking at fees and incentives for bringing affordable developments online. There are other tools, affordable housing funds, other things that we haven't looked at that we've reviewed other people's applications as well. And so we thought this was another good idea and really worth exploring. This is actually talking about if someone is coming in and actually doing an affordable housing project, this is perhaps very specific, but I do think this is a really nice tool to create a really efficient process for them to bring the project online. This is related to some of the other ones that I'm about to bring up. So in the non-market housing space, we're looking, and we've started a bit of work on this already. Mayor Donovan has had some conversations as well. So starting a bit of a working group talking about non-market housing, working with some of the partners in the community. Some of them are listed here. With really an outcome to identify sites and create some investment-ready projects for second rounds of this, or even the way that this funding is playing out, even potentially attaching some of this funding to a project if something can become viable within this funding window. And this is something that I would say is perhaps a little more suited for staff to be more involved in, just with the relationships that would be needed there and some of the trust that's needed, I think, to work together. This is, again, quite specific, but we are finding that some of our definitions aren't keeping up with things like small option homes. That we did have a presentation from the province about small option homes. Really important, really big initiative from the province. And it's interesting, since then we do actually have a proposal that is moving through site plan approval, which I hope to brief the committee on for small option homes in town. So I'll bring that to a future meeting. But this is really making it easier for these types of proposals to come to fruition, so we're not sort of spinning around trying to ram it into a box that it doesn't belong in, and just trying to be nimble towards the actual needs that are out there. This is something that we have started doing anyway, but I think if we added some more capacity and horsepower to this probably should be number one. But I really think people need to understand what the needs are, and we need to be able to communicate this really clearly. We haven't been able to release the needs assessment publicly. That's a big gap. So we keep being told that it's next week. I'm not really sure what the holdup is. But yeah, when we do that, I think there's a lot of information that can be summarized down. Lindsay's been doing a really great job of pulling some of this together already. But but yeah, similar conversation that we had at council about the active transportation work. We really need to socialize some of this change, because I do think the sort of visceral reaction to some of this change is no, is absolutely not. We don't want more. We don't want more people. We don't want this. But you know, the fact that we're looking at 1,700 units as a need by 2032 is a pretty big deal. And then I've presented this initiative in the past. So this is creating a land bank, and we've started doing this as well, of town-owned land. I've shown you some of those properties in the past. Some of them are remnant parcels, and some of them are, I would say, more prime residential parcels, but these are really sort of low density housing that could be brought on the market. So we're proposing to do some development suitability analysis and potential rezonings, and then move forward with RFPs for providers to actually put housing on the ground. I think this would be a really great contribution that's really in the lane of the municipality. We always struggle with, like, what is our role? And I think this is one that's quite clear and people have done before. This is to do with student housing. So I've been involved in some consulting work that Acadia is doing, identifying and trying to get their head around their housing needs on campus. And they're working with the Scion Group that is North American wide. They actually own and do a lot of housing development in the US, but they're more just a consultant in Canada. And my thought is that work is going to wrap up, and inevitably, like all of this consulting work, will have some gaps, and we can pick up on that and move towards, similar to the non-market work, identifying some sites that can be more investment ready for funding with partners with the right program. I think that's what we ran into when we tried to pursue this already with Acadia. It was really a readiness issue, and I think I presented that issue to you. It's no secret. We did try to work with Acadia on a project that this funding could go after. But I think we need to appreciate that they are going through this. They just kicked off a process looking at their housing. So those are the 12 initiatives. The current housing stock that we have, just again, a few numbers. We have about 2,400 units. And this 25 unit issue, this is really how the funding is calculated. So we're looking at 75 units over 3 years. And then with this funding, we're projecting that on top of the 75, there could easily be 100 units. That's just already in the pipeline. Some of that comes from the East End, some of that comes from other projects. We are working with a few people that are very interested in providing an aspect of affordability. And what's happened around the affordable issue has been, we're relying on people like Peter Pauly did to work with third parties, CMHC or Housing Nova Scotia, to provide that element of affordability. And the definitions vary a little bit depending on who they're working with, but we don't really have another tool. And so through this process, we may be able to come up with another means to define affordability. Because in my conversations, people have different definitions and understandings of what affordable actually is. So as this says, the amount of money that we receive really depends on how many units are built or how many units are projected. However, the money adds up really quickly. So where we're sitting in our application, and this is all an online-based application portal, the 110 units, given our growth rate, given all the other factors in the back end of the model, it's projecting about $3.8 million that could come into the town for community infrastructure, capital projects, consulting, as I've said, staff position. So it's a tremendous resource. We have been cautioned by CMHC that even though they built this model that spits out a number, you may not get the number. So they're going to audit the applications, and they may come back and say, you know, there's a lot of merit in your application. Here's $1.2 million, even though, you know, the model is spitting out 3.8 million. And the other side of that they did caution us on is just they weren't expecting the number of applications that they received. So it is a multi-billion-dollar fund, but they're saying that that's going to get chewed up really quickly. So, and there was a little bit of chatter before the meeting. There has been some announcements on some of the larger urban centers receiving funds. So if you're interested, you can see the types of initiatives that that those places are pursuing. Yeah, so this is just a little bit more. I think I've said most of this, but the action plan leading to long-term systemic change, that's what they really want us to focus on. I was really read the Riot Act, honestly, on this call about focusing on that. Because to be honest, I was focusing on project specific, looking at working the application to pay for a capital project. So that it's a little bit hard to do that if they're going to come back and say, actually, you're only getting this much money. So we're trying to generalize it a bit and pitch these sort of proven housing supply strategies. So these are the different pieces that it can be used for. Councillors all know the long list of capital and community infrastructure projects that we need support in funding. That list is long. Yeah, so there is a motion here, but I think it's important for the committee to have a bit of discussion about this. Certainly staff are of the opinion that we might as well apply, is how we're looking at it at this point. I think there'll be an off-ramp associated with this. But just as we've been processing the needs assessment, I'll just reiterate, and talking to people and getting sort of first voice, talking to people with housing issues, it's not sitting well with us not to pursue this, just because it really could add a lot of value. That's all from me.
Thank you, Director Lake. So do we have questions and or comments for Director Lake?
Thanks, Devin. That was pretty clear. It sounds like we are going to be aiming, was it for the 3.4 or 3.8 million? I can't remember, was it 3.4 or 3.8?
We don't think it'll change that much. We think we can confidently apply for around 100 units. What we're doing right now in the back end of the application is trying to apply the rationale between these initiatives and some of the projects that are ongoing, and then speculating on more of a 10-year window. But we're trying to be very conservative. Mike McLean does have to sign off on this, our Director of Finance.
Okay.
So.
And when would we anticipate getting it? Like, when would it come in? Do you know that? Or some has already come in, you said, to other places, but.
It comes in, I think, 4 installments over. There's reporting requirements over time. We won't know until probably around Christmas. So the application will go in end of September, and they're looking to make decisions hopefully in November. We would know. So we would know as part of budget is what we're hoping.
And is this like a one-time only, or does it come around every so many years? Like, I mean, it's.
I've never seen this type of fund. Yeah. I don't know if anyone else has. This is a response to the housing crisis. We suspect there will be additional funds that come out, but the program design may be different. So this is.
We could have potentially, if it comes out again, you could apply for it again, potentially, do you think, or is it?
So part of the thinking on this is when we looked at this fund, we weren't ready to apply for specific projects. So a big focus of what I'm trying to pitch in here is we need to get more ready. Okay. So when the other funds come along, we have the dialogue, the strategy, the data, the partners, at least somewhat on the same page so that we can actually go after a project. Yeah.
Just have one more question, is that okay? As this is an accelerator fund and its projects, and we are going to be expediting projects, do you feel like we're going to be having the staff on right now to be able to manage the increased load?
Part of what we're pitching with this is probably hiring a staff person. Is whether that's a term. So when we were doing the plan review, I think we had 3 term people in over that 5 years. And how that looks, we need to talk about that. But there'd be a combination of adding actual staff capacity as a project manager and definitely having consulting resources on this as well.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
Sure, thanks. So with the number of projects that are needed to submit this application, you said that you're now in a position compared to when we talked about it last time that you've identified those projects that would come along or that we could accelerate permits for? Sorry, I was just a bit unclear about that. It seems to me like it's a lot of housing that's required, and we don't have a lot of housing being built necessarily in that time frame. I don't know. That's just my perception.
We have quite a few permits, proposals, different points in time that wouldn't come to this committee. So we have easily counted 100 units.
Okay.
And really our number was, we were trying to get to 100. That was the big number because we were trying to generate, I was working backwards from $3 million. I'll just be honest about my methodology. It was going to cost about $3 million to rebuild Maple Avenue. And we were, as an example of a capital project, to have a meaningful impact and not sort of piecemeal out some portion of some other project. We were trying to look at it in that manner. I've been advised not to do that, that the money will come in and be more generalized and we can still use it for that, but they don't want me to just sort of pound the sell on that. I think it's good advice. I'm happy they told me that. But yeah, in terms of units between now and then, another avenue I was going down is getting commitment letters from developers that I know are on the cusp of submitting. So they need to pull permits by 26. They don't need to have occupancy.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a number of projects that I have on my desk that would easily get to, I mean, 2 40-unit buildings, you're almost there, like small apartment buildings. So, and that's mostly what people are talking about at this point.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, just one other thing. And then you mentioned one of the initiatives was the R1 change. Was that?
So let me just go back up for a second because this is an important point. A lot of those initiatives, when we calculate the number of units that will be generated, a lot of those are going to be 0, but between now and 26, because it'll take us that long to make these systemic changes that they want.
Right.
Units that are already in the pipeline are going to make up, and we are accelerating those through some of these initiatives, but a lot of these land use bylaw changes, zoning changes, they won't get there in time. But they're also looking at what are the 10-year potential units that you are creating. And so some of that will
Would be R1.
R1 with other zoning changes, other things.
Right. Sorry, and just one last thing too. I read in the news recently about how Nova Scotia was investing in over the next 2 years in a home sharing app. I was just wondering if you had seen that and if that is something that would fit into any additional initiatives that you hadn't covered here that might apply to Wolfville.
We can look at that.
It was.
Yeah.
Did you see the article about it?
No.
It's basically in response to the housing crisis, and they're investing 1.3 million or something in this home sharing app, which basically matches people that are in need of housing with
Provincially, that's provincial government. Yeah,
yes.
Share your house, rent out a room.
Yes. And I don't know, I just was wondering if maybe there was some play with an additional initiative that you could add with respect to that.
We looked at short-term rentals in this box too, and we decided that didn't seem like an area that they were really focused on.
I don't think it's necessarily short-term though.
I just mean in terms of other things that we've been looking at. We
Right.
can totally look at that.
Okay.
And I think there's no harm in putting another initiative in. It's just, it's easy to name the initiative. I have to build sort of a work plan of, is this realistic? Can someone actually pull this off?
Right.
Some of them, I'm going to say it would be really hard to. Not to say that one would be. We have to evaluate these. Some of these may end up falling off. Just out of the viability of trying to meet the metrics that they want us to meet by 2026.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. I don't know how you wrap your mind around all this stuff, Devin. Honestly, there are so many aspects to it and possibilities and 12, right? But it is, to me, it's mind-boggling. You referenced Peter Polly, and I'm wondering if the last and most recent building on Woodman's Grove is occupied yet.
No. No, it's months
That's what I
away.
thought.
It's months away. Yeah.
So,
He's had different holdups for a bunch of different reasons. Yeah, it's
and
it's a challenging
292 is
time.
another one.
Yes, and I will we'll bring a discussion about that. But that also, again, I mean, so there's two sides of this. One is this is an incredibly challenging time to build without policy change that helps you build, like helps you in a process. It's a different thing to get your planning done, get your drawings done, and then actually get the labor and everyone on site to do the project, and then get the materials to the site. That is becoming an entire another hornet's nest that people aren't able to navigate, particularly in the valley when Halifax is absolutely booming like we've never seen. So these are the multiple layers of challenge. And what this fund is recognizing is that there's a lot of different levers that can be pulled on, and they're asking municipalities to essentially pull on all the ones that they can.
Well, I wish you luck.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to word this. I just hope we're not being too cautious. And Devin and I've had lots of chats about this, and I'm maybe less cautious. But we do have a number of groups in town who are not only need housing, but are ready to roll up their sleeves and do something. So that is my only concern. I think that whether it's Acadia or L'Arche, I had a chat with the new chair of L'Arche and to me, the new executive director, who is not that new, but I had met her during COVID. And they have some real housing needs. Their current housing is not meeting their needs, so they're looking for a totally different kind of housing model. So I don't understanding that you don't want to overcommit and then not be able to live up to that for all the reasons that we've just talked about are so difficult. But I also wouldn't undersell the potential in this town and the interest from various groups and residents, the Baptist Church being another one, who are ready for some leadership. Don't know, wouldn't even know how to fill in the application, but if we can take them there. So that's my only concern as I listen to you talk, and I understand. I understand exactly where you're coming from. I think we need more staff on this, whether it's a temporary or not so temporary. The town is growing considerably. So I think there's some exciting and innovative things that we can do. And my ask would be that we are a little bit visionary. We all know when we read resumes or when we read projects, somebody who excites us, something that excites us, is more likely to get a go than something that is too cautious.
I would say just I have been cautious, so one of the things that we're still clarifying is we received $3.8 million, let's say, and the spending window of that fund. And so some of this work, if it goes well, partners willing, partners ready, it seems like we can pivot that money in. I think the capital project and community infrastructure projects, which are in dire need, are always going to be there. And so those are the safe options. But I think that, to your point, if something emerges that's really more in line with putting supply on the ground like tomorrow, I think we need to go after those. I completely agree with you. Yeah.
Yes.
I was just more of a comment. I don't know if any other committee members or council here was trying to understand what we meant by non-market, but I was Googling when I saw non-market housing. I thought that's a new term for me, personally anyway. And what I just learned from Mr. Google, and you can confirm, is that it is these are units that are available for rent or for purchase to low or moderate income people or households, and they can usually involve they could be administered by government or partners. And so Wendy's point, as you were just making it there, Wendy, I was thinking about the partner side, and that obviously is a key thing to your point, Devin, that if we have partners in town that we know, or entities and nonprofits that are just, they need the help, but they're there to manage, because I think for a town like ours, that's the downstream of it as well. Like, I mean, even if we decided and we could tomorrow have 1,700 or however many non-market units that we need, then there's a management aspect for town, right? So it seems to me that that's another side of this, is that partnership development thing, and that's something that council could look at, or that committee, or maybe a working group could be struck to work on building partners in town, like just identifying who they are and what they need, and that perhaps, Devin, that's what you're thinking of when you talk about getting someone on staff to look at it. But I just personally, I found that non-market term rather intriguing, and I just wanted to clarify on that. The accelerator fund, you said it's for pushing a whole bunch of different levers. Is it mainly, is your sense though that the focus is for non-market?
The focus is on supply. And so they're looking at the big picture, the economics 101, need more supply to bring the price down. There's sort of separate boxes within this portal that you can account for affordable units. They will get you more funding. They will get you more points, so to speak, in this application system. So they want both. How that plays out and how you can commit to the non-market, I think, is the gap. And that's what, the mayor and I have been discussing over the last little while, is exactly to your point, is trying to get some of these partners on board and get them more ready.
Yeah, and I just noticed you kind of used interchangeably there, affordable and non-market. So it's kind of seems like it's, I think, even though I agree with you, affordable is a very subjective, loosey-goosey term. I mean, I kind of liked that, the clarity in what I was reading about non-market, but
yeah, my issue with some of it is that, you get 80% of market rent is considered non-market housing in some contexts, and these people are paying $1,800 a month. Like, is that affordable? Is it non-market? So the terminology is confusing, to be honest.
It is. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Elliott?
I always love the story about how Hillcrest Avenue was built in Wolfville with a cooperative and assistance from CMHC. That was in the 1950s, though. Do you see? Sorry, I'm the history buff.
My house was built in 1919.
Do you see a place for cooperatives still?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when we talk about partners, the existing cooperatives in town, if you talk to any housing person, they're pushing you to, do you have any co-ops in town? Get them to build more units. So yes, 100%.
Okay, we've got I'm just wondering if folks are ready to consider this motion or do any. So could I have somebody present the motion, please?
I can move it.
Move it. Yeah.
I would move that the Planning Advisory Committee provide a positive recommendation to council for the town to submit an application to the Housing Accelerator Fund.
Seconder, Councillor Elliott. Okay, call for the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Okay, so that passes. Thank you. Great discussion. I'm sure we'll have more interesting discussion when this comes to council, and it's going to be a long process. So thank you. So we have 2 items left on our agenda: Neighborhood Commercial C2 project update and active transportation update. And you've got 21 minutes to cover those 2. Absolutely. That C2 was really interesting. I really like that report.
Yeah, because this has been presented in the past, so this is bringing this back. And just from my perspective and the way that we do our operations planning, this has been in our operations plan for a couple of years. And really, like, the underpinning of it is to expand commercial in the town generally. And so in 2017 to 2020, we developed this, to the best of our ability, to be honest. And I think you'll see as I go through this, I'm not sure we hit the mark to meet current conditions if we really want to have investment or commercial property. So this all kicked off with our really great student project. Everyone saw the student presentation. So yeah, it was really amazing document that they put together. Probably the best student work I've ever seen. So yeah, they identified barriers and opportunities for commercial growth. We talked about this tax incentive tool that we are able to use. We did have an open house and we did a presentation to PAC. So it's preliminary work and it was done by students. So I can't just take the recommendations. I wouldn't feel right just laying them in front of you and saying, do you want to consider these? And it's mostly because the open house was limited. We talked to 10 people. Like there wasn't that many people that were consulted on this. And so I would like to carry out some discussion myself. So what this really comes down to from our perspective, and the students really daylit a lot of this, is I think there's a kind of an idyllic commercial conversion that a large older home in the C2 zone on Summer Street on Linden, that happens. You know, the existing flower shop on Gaspereau type of model, the Kensington Market type of feel. Unfortunately, where the housing market is right now, people are reaching $800 per room rental, and that's our most affordable housing. And so to, you know, create or lose housing for commercial, so there's a trade-off, and it's discussed in here. But really, part of the problem is the site requirements that we have in the C2 zone, particularly in that area, are very suburban. And so they're setting up a condition like you'd have on Sterling Avenue, essentially. It's very similar. And so that is a very large impediment when you're talking about people looking to invest a lot of money to buy these properties. And if we do want to move the needle on what is happening there now, because it's a very attractive investment right now. I mean, if you look at the Viewpoint ads for these types of properties, here's how much revenue I'm making. And for those, I guess I should go back and just say, like, the biggest thrust of this whole exercise around C2, particularly in the core around the school, was to have a more healthy mix of land uses. So the investment climate is by the room rental for the most part. And we've seen, I mean, you live in the neighborhood. I've had multiple people into my office asking what we're going to do because they're going to leave the neighborhood, on and on. This has been going on for years. So I think it's kind of at a critical point where we kind of need to make a decision whether we want to keep pursuing this or sort of see how the existing regulations. So one of the metrics that they did look at was lot coverage. That's how much of your site you can cover with buildings and hard surface. And so just in really simple terms, a more urban environment like Main Street, which some of these properties back directly onto, you can have 100% lot coverage. So that's very typical for urban hardscaped areas. You have infrastructure that is dealing with these things. So yeah, that's one of the issues. I allude to a few others here. Parking is another obvious issue, but especially in this sort of node that's directly adjacent and attached to Main Street, I do think we need to be considering something more like the requirements on Main Street if we want to go there. Setbacks are another issue. Again, we have sort of more suburban requirements where things are set back off the sidewalk to create. It's very intentional, all of these things. You're creating a kind of a bucolic environment. Bill 177 is another piece of this. I'm kind of doing a bit of a reminder to you here, but this is essentially a phased in tax assessment tool. Typically, it's been done over 10 years. And so what's happening is someone will have an existing property with an existing tax bill. They do a bunch of improvements. They have a new tax bill, and we give them a break on those improvements and the difference over a period of time. So it's an incentive for them to invest and have some savings. There may be other incentivized tools. We haven't dug deeper into that. More development rights is always an incentive. So that sometimes isn't considered one. Less parking requirement is an incentive. And these are tools that are used. So I'm just going to leave it there. So I know there's a lot in that report, but I'll leave it for you folks to read. What we're really looking for direction on is, do we want to keep moving forward? I would like to have some discussions with these property owners. I'm having discussions with them anyway on a range of issues. My staff are meeting with them. And what we would propose is to bring something back. I don't see these changes as being that complicated, to be honest. And so we do some consultation and bring back some of the directions that we want to pursue, and then we could sort of finalize those and get a recommendation from planning committee to go to council. But I think at this point we've talked about this. We have this sort of white paper, I would call the student work, to lay out the issue. And I think we can dive in a little bit and then bring some recommendations and make some changes, hopefully. Yeah, I guess the only other point is I think the C2 zone, if people have been around for a while, there used to be a C4 zone, and it was the properties outside of the downtown. And so I think the C2 zone is well suited to those properties. The inns, the things up on Pleasant. Again, you're in a suburban context, but you're bringing this commercial element. I think it's challenging when you're literally directly adjacent, and we are, I think, trying to expand our commercial offerings. So on that.
A question or a comment. I agree with you. It was a great report when we first saw it, and this was good. I'm a little concerned because I don't know how we will handle the parking. There was a time, I think it was before I was on council, that council did away with parking in the downtown. I get emails from time to time, as the rest of council does, from residents who live on Elm who have no parking and they don't know where to park their car. We also know that on Summer Street and on Linden Street, there are pressures to just let cars park all over the front lawns. At the time when there was such a limited parking requirement, council of the day was told students don't have cars. Well, that certainly hasn't been the case. Students all have cars. So it's not a disagreement with your recommendations, but just how are we going to provide cars for people who do live on Elm Street and do have a car, but their landlord is grandfathered under the time when they did not need to provide any parking. And so we know we have a few people in that situation. So what are we going to do for them? We're going to create more parking so that if you do live downtown, or if you have a shop downtown, you have to park over here. All possibilities, but we can't just do what I think was done in 2008 and say people don't have cars, but they did have cars.
Thank you. I am very receptive and welcoming to see recommendations on changes to C2. So I'm excited to see more on that. I'd like to propose a project name change for it, though, because I think it's slightly confusing or misleading to talk about it as a C2 project, in the sense that C2 is kind of spread out in lots of different places. And you alluded to that with the historical C4, where you have C2, where I live, where your development is going to be, and where the Rice Bowl, the new restaurant, opened in the house. And there's a lot of places like that I think C2 as it stands today works really, really well. And I think a lot of these changes that we're talking about are really specific to Linden, Summer, Gasbro Ave, commercial, core, downtown, urban. So I just think that it might be confusing to call it the C2 project when really it's the downtown project. So I just wanted to propose that, because I don't think it is an issue with C2 as a whole, but more of like that specific area. And then, yes, I mean, I guess I just would like to see more of the recommendations. I think that, for example, I hear you on the parking, but right now, as it stands with the C2 in that area, for example, if you wanted to have a 600 square foot coffee shop with 6-unit residential on top, okay, just as an example, based on the square footage of the coffee shop, under C2, you'd be required to have 5 parking spots. And then for the residential, you need 1 parking spot per residential. So that's 11 parking spots. And because of the land use percentage for the lot size, you can only have 40% of your lot size taken up with hard land use, right? So that your driveway, your 11 parking spots, and your building can only take up 40% of your entire lot size. So it would be technically impossible to do that under the current C2 bylaws. And that really makes it difficult for investors to come in and say, I want to spend all this money changing these places on summer. They can't do that. Yeah, so that was just my anecdote. Thank you.
If I could just make a comment regarding the parking. I recently had conversations with some of my younger neighbors who bring trucks and cars and asked that question about cars and why does everybody need one? And the response was, well, we've got parking available, so why not? But really, if that parking weren't available, they'd still come to Acadia to study, and they'd still like to live downtown and where they actually do walk everywhere, and the car sits parked for taking up green space. And that's what came to my mind was if we didn't require parking, we would have probably more green space, because one of the things that they told me is how much they like to be outside on the grass, and the only place they have grass is on the front lawn, because the entire back is. So there are a lot of very competing, conflicting ideas and values and things going on, and mixed messages around, I think, around parking. What I would like to see, this is a really important issue, I think, for us to have a more fulsome discussion on. And I'm not convinced that our meetings and allowing just a few minutes to discuss this are really going to do justice to this topic. Because I think the points that you've raised, Kelly, are very important. The whole question around parking and what would make it feasible, and how we make those distinctions between a more urban versus a more suburban context. So what I would like to propose is that as a committee, we maybe find the time to workshop this a little bit, or have, set aside meeting time that we can really delve into this and analyze the work that the students have done, because it's a very good report. It has so much information that goes in so many directions. And I think if we're going to recommend even anything to do with changes to building height, parking requirements, the R1, this all has a spillover effect. Because the parking, for me, we have students living well outside who don't have cars and have to walk a lot further. And then we have a whole bunch of students who live next door to Acadia. They cross the street to go to class, and they've got their cars sitting there. Like, there's so many conflicting things going on that maybe we rezone parking. We make it required in certain areas. There's so many things I think that we can be creative about in terms of these issues. And it's difficult I personally find, to do it within the context of a meeting where we've got so many other really important issues to think about at the same time. So I don't know how the rest of the committee feels about it, but I would just like to propose that maybe we, with an issue like this, set aside, find a time where we could delve into it, I think, in a little bit more detail.
I love that idea.
I do too. And I guess what I was thinking too, related to the parking, is traffic. because I was thinking of Kentville and how, you know, the main street and you go around and the one ways. And so I was thinking, okay, so summer starts to become busier, right? So there's the impact on the people that are still residing there or that are residing in the upstairs units. So I'll have to say the traffic is related to the parking and the cars and the old four-way stop and what happens to that when we get more people coming up the other side.
So Director Lake, what do you think?
I think let us work on the workshop idea. I think that's a great idea. If everyone can understand the issue more, that's huge. There's certain owners there that I would like to talk through the incentive more with to see how that could work. And then maybe we can at the workshop do a few case studies of
Or invite them to the
actual
workshop, yeah.
properties. Like
Maybe have them come in.
and invite them to it. Yeah,
invite them to it,
exactly.
'cause I think the more we talk about it, the more we understand what
Yeah.
these, you know, the more creative we can be about what exactly we need in the way of bylaws or what we no longer need in the way of bylaws.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that sounds great. And I think as long as everyone's okay with just moving this forward, that's really all I was looking for today. I wanted to
Okay.
make sure that I'm not out talking to people and the will of the committee was actually, let's just leave it as is. So
Okay,
Yeah.
No, you can have at it.
so if we can just agree that this is going to be moved forward by staff,
Mhm.
we're going to look for a time
Yep.
somehow to set up something in the near future so that we can delve into this more. Okay, great. So now, Devin, you've got 5 minutes. So
I just
4
won't,
minutes.
I won't actually do anything. I would just encourage people to look at the report that went to
The
committee
active
of the whole
transportation.
on active transportation. I
great.
can bring it to a future meeting in the form of, I have a abridged PowerPoint that we can go through. So if folks want to, it's not critical to go through that today. So I can bring it to a future.
I know. We're just trying to get out early to avoid bad weather.
I'm at the will of the committee. I
I mean,
will,
if people. No, it does.
Well,
go to
we
6.
can take a consensus if you want.
Yeah.
Like,
It was just a suggestion. The meeting is formally, all meetings are from 4 to 6. My suggestion at the beginning is that we try to finish by 5:30, just to allow people who are walking or whatever to get home. So, because it was a very short agenda for today, it was not a long agenda, so. But if there are questions on the active transportation issue for Dr., I think we have, now that you teach at Acadia, I think we have to teach Director Lake. Alrighty.
we know it, but
I just wondered why we were 5 to 5:30, yeah, just.
No, I explained that at the beginning, and I think that was, So-
I'm comfortable.
okay. So if no one has any, the only thing is scheduling our next meeting for October the 12th. Director, Lake, do you see this workshop on C2 coming before the next meeting or after this next meeting? What do you think?
so we're in process on scheduling a number of things in October. So we're doing some parks planning work, and I think it would be beneficial for some folks. We're doing some specific consultation on Reservoir Park, on Waterfront Park,
Okay,
and we'd like to wrap up that consultation by the end of October.
okay.
So we may be able to get it in there, but I also think it might be beneficial to just do it after. We'll get those done and do it right after.
Okay,
I think, to be honest, it's less work for me to do a workshop than schedule 7 or 8 meetings with a whole bunch of different people.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy to do that.
Was the workshop open to like?
no, it could be mainly for our committee.
Another committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could look at options and see how much interest there is. I think standing around tables and not doing it this way is definitely needed.
Okay, so our next meeting then will be October the 12th at 4 p.m. And so could I have a motion to adjourn, please? So moved, Councillor Ingham, Councillor Elliott, all in favor? Aye, great. Contrary minded? Great, thank you. This is a very fulsome discussion today.
Good.